So our next speaker is none other than the President and CEO of TELUS Spark, Jennifer Martin. You may have noticed that there was a small misprint in the program. Her last name was Jennifer Martin Sparks. She wants you to know she loves her job, she just didn't marry it. TELUS Spark is a science museum with interactive exhibits, multimedia presentations, and educational demonstrations here in Calgary, where more than 380,000 visitors attend annually, including over 77,000 students. Ms. Martin is known for guiding the completion of the first new purpose-built science centre in Canada in over 25 years. The resulting Weston Family Innovation Centre, a 12,000 square foot renewal program, became a template for science centres around the world wanting to engage teens. How are we to engage more women in engineering? Well, I'm fairly certain we're about to hear from the right person. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Jennifer Martin to the podium.
Boy, there were so many things that I wanted to talk to Janet about as well, because there's so much crisscross with what she was saying, and I hope I can lead some of that along the way too.
If this works for you.
Okay. I'm okay with hitting buttons here too. I'm pretty good. Yeah, so I'll just work with the machine. So I'm hoping that you can see, I'm going to use some words here. I'm not a speech reader. I really wish I could do that. I tend to the public speaking question a few minutes ago, I go blind when there's paper in front of me. I literally will start with the first few words and then zoom, I'm off. So I am going to use some words here that will help spark my conversation with you and move things along. So, you know, there's stuff we've heard, and you've been talking about it for the last little bit, but if we step back into a larger perspective, this word crisis comes up quite a bit. Science, technology, engineering, the STEM jobs are crucial. We don't have enough people going into them. We don't have enough interest in that in schools. We actually do pretty well in the education system, particularly here in Alberta, and Canada's in pretty good shape across the world for math marks, for science marks. But somehow culturally, we're missing the hit here. We, you know, the gnashing of teeth and the wailing about workforce. Many of you are just starting your careers. There's this huge concern, and you're in great position, about the retirees. You know, people leaving not just with skills, but with knowledge of the industries that they work in. So really important to the points of mentorship and such, that we connect the dots there. But there are new demands. Their adage is the top 5 careers in the next 10 years haven't even been thought of yet. There's a lot of that sort of language going around. So instead of maybe thinking explicitly about what the career unknown is, what are the skills that are needed to be ready for that? So to the planter, I'm a planter type person too, I would say, and I was told early in my career, a quote that was attributed to Louis Pasteur: "Fortune favors the prepared mind." So your mind may be prepared, but your skills need to be there too. So what skills, I'll talk about a little bit further. And then this big issue about innovation generally, and I'm going to use innovation as a bit of my theme through this conversation. The Conference Board of Canada ranks Canada as a D in innovation around the world. Sucks. We're not innovative. Now their measures are their measures. We get good school marks in some areas that would lead to innovation, but when you package it up and you look at some of the other pieces, and I will talk about risk-taking and collaboration and sharing and expressing our ideas, we don't do well. Now, interesting conundrum, because we're a pretty prosperous country. So maybe we should be measured differently, but nevertheless, it is a big issue, and we've got to think very hard about that. So, you know, concerns about all of this. I have a hypothesis about why this is, and I'm a scientist, so I know that there are many more engineers in the room than scientists, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second, but, you know, I come up with a hypothesis. So what's the thing? And I think part of what goes on that prevents us as women from also, and thinking about girls becoming engineers and scientists, is that we who are already in our professions cast ourselves too narrowly. We talk about who we are too narrowly. We think about who we are too narrowly. And I'm going to push on that button a little bit today and see if it resonates. And gives us some things to think about. So, to some words that I've got on the screen here. So there's this scientific method: asking questions, doing a hypothesis, testing that, analyzing the data, communicating your results. This is the basis of stuff. There are lots of different ways to frame this. I pulled this off the internet. And I thought, if I have a hypothesis, let's remember where it fits into everything. There's an interest. I've sparked some curiosity. I'm going to frame the question, and now I need to test it. But I thought, if I'm in an engineering room, let me also understand better, and again, you'll probably quibble with some of the pieces, but this is a way to frame it, where the engineering design process and the scientific process kind of bear resemblance greatly to each other, but also diverge a little bit. I noticed at the very end of the engineering design process, there's no communicating your results. And I think that's very unfair. But again, this is just, again, trying to slice narrowly through this. But you'll see an awful lot that goes back and forth on this. And to my point about innovation, there's innovation in all of this. Coming up with an idea that you need to test. You might not come up with a product innovation. You may be innovative in your thinking. And that's more where I want to focus, is how do we get those skills? How do we really think about innovative thinking? And therefore, what are the indicators? What are the indicators of engineering? What are the indicators of science? What are the indicators of innovation? And trying to kind of take the definitional stuff and put it aside for a minute and open up our thinking more maybe to the qualities so that we can change that conversation, which is where I'd like to go. Now, as the Science Center, we took innovation back from the Weston Family Innovation Center at the Ontario Science Centre in Toronto to what we do now here at TELUS Spark. And we said, what can we contribute to innovation in Canada? And we broke it down arguably into 4 categories. We don't do some things, we do these. Creative problem solving, idea generating, communication, risk taking, and collaboration. Those to us are the things that we think as a science center we can change in society. We can help people understand creative problem solving. We can help them feel comfortable taking risks, understand the value of collaboration. And when I say we, I mean everybody, but certainly my target audience is families with kids under 12. Teenagers are very important, but that's a different game altogether, and a very scattered and important one, and we are moving into that, but it does take a different set of skills. So, but also let me just give you the other side. So this is kind of my loose, open way of thinking about innovation in those categories. Clay Christensen has written some really powerful, and he really started taking the word innovation and moving it somewhere, which in 1997 with the Innovator's Dilemma. He's since gone into what he calls the innovator's DNA in 2009, and he continues to publish. He writes usually through the Harvard Business Review and his own books. There are a lot of people doing some really powerful stuff if you want to back up and dig into innovation. He's got some very specific attributes, the DNA of great innovators. So it's a really important opportunity. So if I have a more open, let's be less definitional and think more about indicators. What are the indicators of engineering, small e? Now I recognize that the discipline, the making sure things are right, to Janet's earlier conversation, you don't use your intuition on things that you can't take risks on. But there are qualities about our innovativeness, and I think there are qualities about engineering that if we look at them in a slightly different light might help us with this conversation. So I've got some pictures here, some moments at TELUS Spark. Is this an engineer? Now she's maybe people say, well, she's just passive. No, I don't think she's passive at all. She's clearly paying attention. She's ready to be engaged. She's in the space and wanting to be involved. So she's even volunteered. She's aware. She's excited about something, and she's connected. Are there elements of engineering just in her connection to the activity there? I'll tell you what she's doing in a second. She's in it, right? Look at the purpose and the interest that this young girl is forwardly, physically. She's not cranky look on her face. She's in there. She's engaged. What she's doing is actually programming to do some work with the machine some of you may recognize. We're using these a lot at TELUS Spark right now. Anybody know what that is? Yeah, 3D printer. So it's a 3D printer, and she's been programming to create something. And 3D printing, many of you will get involved with it if you haven't already. You know, in arguably 18 months, you can get them at Staples. But this is really a radical piece, and my job is to create an environment where we can play with this stuff. Play being a very important part of innovation as well. What is this? Well, in fact, it's a bit of adornment. It may not be solving a major structural issue, but it has got the elements of understanding. I have an idea. I want to put it into a three-dimensional form. How do you bridge that gap? So, you know, these are, to me, they're indicators of an action that may lead to thinking about becoming an engineer. The embellishment of things. This buried, and it's not quite showing up as well with the rendition here, but there's a bicycle buried in all of that. Are the lights contributing to the bicycle being a more efficient machine? Maybe not, but are they attracting this young woman to now getting engaged? Like, what are the entry points? What were the things that got you excited to go into the school and the career that you've now got? What if we remember those small triggers sometimes that are very important and talk about them more along the way? This one is really important to me. Here's Mom. Mom, is she engineering? Well, no, she's not necessarily creating, but boy, she's introducing her kids to something pretty cool. She's got in her hand a remote. That chair moves. It's a robotic chair, if you will. And she's spinning the kids around in the atrium at TELUS Park. She's engaged in a physical and active way that can open up another conversation. She's not standing away and letting the kids do it. She's there. And that, I think, is a really important part of an indicator that may lead to a conversation that ends up in engineering. So back to thinking about then the sort of more lateral skills. How do we get ready for the opportunities that may come our way? For those of us who aren't planners, who can see a clear path, how do we ensure that not just to science, not just to engineering, you know, how do we really contribute to society in whatever form we have? So we talk about those things in four categories, that back to the innovation, the creative problem solving. These are actions that are about creative problem solving. The little girl on one side is using materials in an air tube and exploring. Yes, she's actually exploring aeronautical principles. She doesn't know that. She doesn't need to know that at this age. She needs to get excited. But she also then needs an environment where somebody can lead her to the next stage, to give her that, hey, and look what happens when. And what if we did this? And open up the conversation to more exploration, generate the excitement. Problem solving in another way, and I don't know if many of you have seen this exhibit at TELUS Park, trying to figure out how to balance an electricity grid. These houses will all light up if you, well, actually they won't. We put a little bug in the system. They'll never all light up. And one of our exhibit developers was really worried about that. Said, well, that's not fair. And we tested this with like little paper houses and an LED light and pegboard and alligator clips. And boy, were people excited to play, but they weren't just playing, they were trying to solve a problem. And they were trying to solve it in different ways. So it became a very powerful exhibit, and if you come for an adults only night, you'll get to come and play. Communicating and idea generating. If you give them pieces of electronics and say, well, you know, you can't make a functional robot, but what a representation of a robot might be, take some capacitors and a hot glue gun, and you can be pretty creative. These are all components of moving forward, creative in an animation state where you're actually using chalkboard. So you know how you do or little line animation, you move the line, you erase it, you put the next one. Well, chalkboard, who's had a chance to pick up chalk and work on a blackboard? And yeah, no, right? That was my life in school. There's something really tactile about holding chalk, about the feeling of it as it's moving across slate. That's very different from a whiteboard. So again, you never know what questions might come out. You want to change the context. You want to change the materials as much as possible. Taking risks, smart risks, not risks that are going to endanger people's lives. Getting wet, for some people, is taking a risk. Looking foolish as an adult is a major risk for some people. and expressing those things. The picture on the right side of this is a little card about this big. In the Creative Kids Museum, which is an area for sort of early childhood education, early childhood design development for really younger kids, we have these beautiful structures. We call them the trees, and we use these trees to do all sorts of things. And last year we called it the wish tree. And so we had a little table right beside it and red cards, and you could hang your wishes up on this tree. And this, I think, is an adult saying, I wish to sing without fear. That was their wish. Taking a risk can come in so many different ways. And to the intuitive sense that Janet was talking about, a very important thing to know when's the right time. But also, I believe in Canada, we're a little too safe. We need to be safe. Big S, no question. Small s, safety, we need to push our boundaries a little bit more. That's where innovation can come, is when you're not sure and you're pushing off to the edge of something. So it can come in lots of different forms. But then our last piece, innovation from a science center context, from a 21st century skill context, is collaborating. I love the image of the two boys. That table is a tilt table. So they've taken Jenga type blocks and put it together. Look at the body language, right? Big brother, he's not too close to his little brother, but he's pretty proud of him. And they work together to create that. And celebrating collaboration. This is not a single person. Janet also talked about how important it is to work together. It's more fun. I mean, we're social human type beings. We want to get connected. We can't problem solve and be as rich in our thinking if we're doing it on our own. But it's not always comfortable. And school is getting better at it, primary grades, but not always. So it's still kind of you do the test. Group work is certainly getting better, but I think there's still a bit to go. So with all this creativity, with all this opportunity for us to express our ideas, to roll up our sleeves, can we think about science? Can we think about engineering? And the thing I think helps to bridge the innovation in some different ways. And therefore, can we talk about the conversation differently? Well, I wish we could, but we still see ourselves in this kind of narrow light. I'm a scientist, I'm a CEO. Well, I'm a lot more than that, and I think all of you are a lot more than what you are. We tend to be too specific when we think of ourselves and we talk. I'd like us to think about broadening that conversation. I think we need to think about how our skills apply, how our interests apply in so many ways that will open up the stereotypes that we're dealing with and start to shift those. So my last point before maybe we open for some conversation is to think who else we are. How many people in the room sing? Who fixes things in their house? Yeah, cooking, sculpting. I'm a gardener. I also can wire electrical stuff most of the time. When we need to be focused. We need to be the person in the moment, but none of us in our careers are only one thing. And from my standpoint, leading an organization, I often, when I do interviews with potential candidates, say, okay, so here's your resume. What's not on here that you'd really, tell me about you in another way. And I had a young man many years ago. He was applying for an exhibit developer job, which needs, science communication, but a three-dimensional sense, the ability to see things, whether it's on plans or build them, move them forward. And he said, really? What else don't I have? And he sort of scratched his head. He said, do you mean like the hovercraft I built when I was 14? Yes. Yes. We don't tell our stories that way because we get really narrowly focused. And I would like us to open that conversation up. So with that, my call to action is how can we change? How can we change that language and that conversation? Thank you.